So the other trailer that has had me absolutely upside down is the Kingsman trailer. Which I love that they're taking the Kingsman thing and going back to World War I and bringing Ray Fiennes in. That looks like a lot of fun.
The original Kingsman.
That's it.
From which the Kingsman would, yeah.
But it looks fun. It looks like it's smart. They said, you know what, we did everything that we could with these characters and with the Colin Firth thing. The second one was not good.
Yeah.
With Julianne Moore in the jungle putting people in blenders and making drugs.
It slipped into a little bit of camp.
Yeah, it got too campy. So this feels like they're getting their bearings right again. I'm getting excited for the fall season.
It looks like it's going to be fun, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And a couple of good-looking dramatic movies. We talked about the Dolomite, Eddie Murphy thing last week. Yeah, so it could be nice.
It's going to be good. It's going to be all good. Listen, email us at gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com. Tell us what we're just real curious. We want to know what your movie-going habits are becoming like with these subscription systems. These subscription plans at Regal and AMC and Alamo Drafthouse is about to launch one as well. Is this changing the way that you do your movie going and your movie watching? Are you going to do less at home and more at the theater? Are you looking for a family plan? Is it still too expensive? Is it too far? Do you prefer one over the other? Just curious. Email us, gods@digigods.com, gods@cinegods.com. Just want to know, what do the emergence of affordable subscription plans, what's that doing to your movie-going habits? All of which, of course, is an outgrowth of MoviePass, which went out of business because they didn't realize how much people wanted to go to the movies.
Yeah, cheap.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's the difference here? What is the thing that is going on, other than they're all broken up as opposed to, what's the thing that'll make it different this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I always say about Netflix, too, that Netflix's problem is they're not backstopped by anything. They don't have a business a core business to absorb the losses if they make a miscalculation.
Like Amazon,
Apple, all these other guys have a core business that absorbs things. Disney, right? Disney really can afford to lose a lot of money on movies because they sell toys, they have theme parks, they have all the rest of it.
Yeah, no movie is going to not going to have a Heaven's Gate situation with Disney. Yeah.
No. And so, yeah, that's, you're looking for backstopped business, and the theaters, they can afford to have a subscription plan not work because they're still charging per movie. Yeah. They still charge for concessions.
Yeah.
They have other ways of balancing the books.
Yeah, no matter what you paid to get into that movie for the ticket to get in to see that movie, they're trying to sell you something else anyway.
Yeah.
That will have a value. So
look, when I was a lowly man's theater assistant manager, one of my jobs was to do the ordering. I would do all the concessions ordering. And I'll tell you, you become very aware of what a ripoff it is when you're ordering a 50-pound sack of kernel corn for whatever it was, $4 or $5, and you're ordering giant cartons of syrup that get turned into Coca-Cola and 7-Up and whatever else it is. Mm-hmm. And you realize, and you do the math, you're like, wow, we're spending pennies on this stuff, and then it winds up being sold for $2.75, $3.75, $4.75. It's like a 1,000% markup.
Yeah, the margins on the concessions have always been perfectly insane.
It's crazy,
and it's particularly large with fountain drinks because it's pennies per it's pennies for 16 ounces. And you charge we pay dollars.
Yeah, it literally is pennies. I mean, for popcorn and soft drink, it's pennies. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Even more so now. Well, we're going to start with some foreign language stuff. Some really, really interesting foreign language stuff has come down the pike lately, and I want to make sure you are all aware of it. A couple of great ones from Facets, who, Facets is where a lot of the more obscure stuff goes because others just don't know how to monetize it. And there's a couple of really, really interesting ones here. One from 1963, the other one from 2001. From 1963... and this is really, really historic. This is from an Iranian filmmaker named and I'm going to murder his name, and I just, I apologize in advance. Farrokh Farrokhzad, whose sister Puran Farrokhzad is actually interviewed here. And if you're not familiar with Farrokhzad, this is a legendary Iranian poet and a filmmaker, a woman who foreshadows all of the Iranian New Wave that emerged in the 80s and the 90s. And so this is some of the rare opportunities that you may have to actually see Iran from a period that predates what we're accustomed to seeing in Iranian movies, in Persian cinema. And I know very little about Farrokhzad as a poet or as a filmmaker, but this is a really, really interesting assemblage. It's not a narrative film. It's an assemblage of footage, and with poetry in many cases recited over the footage. So it's sort of like cinematic tone poems, and really interesting. And it gives you a wonderful look at what the sort of the grit and the soul of Iran was in the 1960s, at least, when it was a very different society. And, the history of Iran is really fascinating. And everything before the Iranian New Wave and before the Iranian Revolution of 1979 really is kind of a lost world to a lot of us. So this is really a beautiful, beautiful movie, beautifully shot, rare footage. And if this is your cup of tea, you really, really want to get that on the shelf. The one from 2001 is a Uruguayan film. And I should say the title of this too. This is The House is Black, otherwise known as Kanasia Ast, a film by Farrokh Farrokhzad. The House is Black is the actual title of it, from Facets. It's beautiful. The Uruguayan film is 25 Watts by the filmmakers Juan Pablo Rabella and Pablo Stoll. And this is actually an outgrowth of a certain class of American films like Shirley
Clark's.
Shirley Clark,
yeah.
Shirley Clark's films, and a lot of the more independent films kind of grew out of Shirley Clark. But it is this is basically looking at Uruguay through the eyes of kind of young millennial, slackers and layabouts, and it all takes place over one day, shot in black and white, very, very, very low budget. And wants to get really inside what's going on in Uruguay today with this very, very sort of layabout generation of youth. It's not really a flattering portrait of Uruguay, but it is provocative, and it does have some really, really interesting visuals in it. Again, written and directed by Juan Pablo Rabella and Pablo Stoll.
Recently, you're among the nations that recently legalized marijuana.
Oh, that's right.
Uruguay.
Yeah, that's right.
Might answer the question.
Cohen Media. We love Cohen. I'm very proud of Cohen. Tim and I have done commentary for Cohen.
Yes.
And full disclosure. And Cohen, we should point out, recently purchased the Landmark Theaters chain of cinemas from Mark Cuban. So it is no longer attached to Magnolia. Now Cohen owns Landmark, and you can tell when you go to a Landmark, they're touting all of their art stuff. It's a much artier vibe now, and
kind of like the Limleys used to be back in the day.
Yeah.
And then the Limleys did the thing where they started bringing in mainstream movies.
Yep.
Particularly to all the locations, and now it seems Cohen wants to swing it back the other way. Very odd, very odd.
Well,
something's going on with Limleys too, if I recall correctly.
Limleys for sale now.
They're for sale.
They're for sale. Yeah.
It looks like Netflix is might swoop in and because Netflix bought the Egyptian, or they
invested in the Egyptian, and they did buy something.
Yeah, which is all strategic and has to do with they can release films and a whole different story.
Well, the Cohen film here is absolutely terrific, and this didn't stay in theaters very long, but I hope people discover it on Blu-ray. Is Girls of the Sun, which is based in the actual factual fighting women of Kurdistan. The Girls of the Sun Battalion, which is a real thing. These are women who went out there and just put themselves on the line along with all the men to fight for fight for a Kurdish homeland. This is sort of also seen through the eyes of a French journalist who is writing about them and covering them, and it is really it is a fascinating movie, and it's just so vibrant and so urgent and so right now, and has some really, really superb performances in it, including the superb Iranian actress Golshifteh Farahani, who's in all kinds of things. You've seen her in, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and on and on and on. But she is just magnificent in it. It's a really, really good film. It's really gritty. It's beautifully done and directed by Eva Husson. And what a terrific movie that is. If you're a fan of Buñuel, got a couple of old Buñuel movies here. It's really interesting. So last week on Film Week, we covered an animated film that is based on Buñuel's life, and based on Buñuel, it's a straight up animated movie, a Spanish animated movie about Buñuel's second film, which was a short documentary about the impoverished people living in the mountains in Spain. It has footage from his movies, so it got me onto a little bit of a Buñuel kick. Just as Kino releases a couple of Buñuel films on Blu-ray, Death in the Garden and The Milky Way. What's not often realized is Buñuel didn't hit his stride till he was in his 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
That's when he really hit his stride.
Yeah.
He made a lot of movies that didn't really make much of a mark before that. But these are from the 50s and the 60s. This is Buñuel is 56. He was born in 1900. So he's 56 when he made Death in the Garden. He's 69 when he made The Milky Way in 1969. And he is at his level best with both of these. This is the surrealist, absolutely just owning it. Death in the Garden is probably the lesser known of them, but it has some beautiful performances. Simone Signoret is absolutely terrific. It's really all about it's an adventure story done in the style of a surrealist, of a Spanish surrealist. And these shenanigans, these military shenanigans, these colonial shenanigans taking place in the jungle, and Simone Signoret is absolutely terrific. Charles Vanel is this really mysterious guy and is also really, really good. And Michel Piccoli, always classic. Audio commentary by Sam Dayan, who's a film critic. And then The Milky Way is a little bit controversial because it's pushing the envelope even on what we normally expect from Buñuel as a surrealist. It's it's kind of inspired by, loosely based on some 16th century novels, and it compares maybe a little bit. It's like a surrealist Barry Lyndon might be a way to kind of describe it. It's a bit of a road trip through some weird experiences and some strange, unexpected, sometimes very, very disturbing events. And it has a lot to say about religion, modern-day religion in Spain and in elsewhere. And it was produced by Serge Silberman and with the production manager Uli Picard, which is worth noting because they're the ones who were supposed to do David Lean's last film, Nostromo. I actually went to the offices in Paris. I don't remember how I got in. I wrote Serge Silberman. This is like back in 1992 or something. I wrote Serge Silberman a letter. Somehow got invited to the offices when he wasn't there. And Uli Picard, the production manager, showed me the boards for Nostromo all around the office. Gave me a tour of the office. That was back when you could do crazy stuff like that. So anyway, from 1969, The Milky Way, and from 1956, Death in the Garden, two really superb Blu-rays of some classic Buñuel movies. And then I'll turn it over to Tim to do a little TV here in a moment. I want to make mention of... Well, actually, here, I'll do this first. We have another Django movie. Django the Bastard. You ever heard of this?
Did not know that one. I thought I knew all my... Is it the Sergio?
No.
Corbucci?
This is the other Sergio Garone.
Sergio Garone. Okay.
I never even... There's so many Django movies that I didn't even know existed. This is from Synapse. Sergio Garone directed this and co-wrote it with Anthony Stefan, and it's yet another freaking Django movie. It's a lot like It actually it seems to take more of its inspiration from some Clint Eastwood movies, some of Clint's spaghetti westerns. A few dollars more, and Good, the Bad, and the
more
Ugly.
Leone-esque than
more Leone-esque. And it also has the story is a lot like High Plains Drifter, which actually came afterwards. So you got to kind of wonder if somebody didn't get an inspiration there or something. But it doesn't really have anything in common with the other Djangos, other than the fact that it's an Italian film with a mysterious guy named Django in it, and he kills people and lays in, and it's pretty well made. I mean, it's not perfect spaghetti western. It's certainly not on the same level as the others, but there it is. It's another Django movie, Django the Bastard, on Blu-ray from Synapse. And here are the three I want to spend just a moment on, too. Jean Gabin, legendary French actor. We mostly know him from Grand Illusion. But Jean Gabin made a lot of really, really good movies.
Yeah, for a lot of very important directors.
Who
crossed that band of French directors from the classical ones to the new wave guys,
from the 30s right into the 60s.
Yeah,
30s into the 60s. For 30 years, he was a guy, and he's a legendary figure. And we have three terrific Jean Gabin films here, and not by slacky directors either. The first one is a Michel Carnet movie. Michel Carnet, who made Children of Paradise. And this is with Jean Gabin, Michel Simon, and Michelle Morgan, the beautiful Michelle Morgan. This is Port of Shadows.
Oh, yeah.
Port of Shadows is an amazing movie, which is based on a novel, a very famous novel, that is all about the road that goes to the port city of Le Havre. And it stars Jean Gabin as a deserter who's just trying to sort of get his life back on track, and it gets into this really great noirish turns and twists with these really shady figures. Beautifully shot, fantastic cinematography, really, really great performances from Michelle Morgan especially, who is just it's in black and white, and you'd swear that somehow her eyes are blue, just the same.
Yeah.
They just pop. It's really, really a very, very cool film. Has an introduction from a French film critic and a documentary as well. That is from 1938. And then we get into Jean Gabin, slightly more grizzled and gray in the 1950s, and this is a little bit more in the new wave style. Jacques Becker directs him in the next one, which is Touchez pas au Grisby, and meaning don't mess with Grisby, because Grisby will mess you up.
Old gangster, yeah.
Jean Gabin is here with a couple of really hot young people in Lino Ventura and Jean Moreau, who are just chewing it up with the new wave. And you know what? He owns them both.
Yeah,
he just owns them both. He is he's just still so the man. This is a gangster story. It's also a noir, but boy, it's an awful lot of fun. And this also has a film critic commentary by Nick Pinkerton, an interview with Jean Becker, and an interview with Jean Moreau. It's all really fun to kind of set it in its place. And then the most recent one came from 1955. Here, this is Razzia sur la Schnouf by Henri Decoin, Decoin, and this is also with Lino Ventura, and once again, totally owns him. This only has a commentary with Nick Pinkerton, which is fine. This is also based on a novel, and in this one, Jean Gabin plays kind of a master criminal who goes back from the U.S., leaves the U.S., goes back to France, and winds up getting into a getting involved in a big drug distribution operation, and where it goes from there is pretty gritty and pretty grueling. It's kind of like an early version of the French Connection from the other side, truth be told. It's like the beginning of all of that stuff in 1955, and it's a great double feature with the French Connection. It really it compares very, very favorably. Henri Decoin, not overly known in the United States, but still a really, really sharp filmmaker.
Indeed. Little TV.
Yes, do some TV.
Let's start with some really good British stuff here. Grantchester, the complete fourth season. I rather enjoy. Well, I enjoy just about all the British mysteries, but I particularly enjoy the ones that are set sometime in the past. Very often they're set in the 30s or the 40s. It is occasionally in the 60s, as Endeavour, which is another one that we have here, both from PBS. Masterpiece Mystery Theater. So this is just good stuff. So Grantchester, season 4, Endeavour, season 6. That one's set in the 60s. They both follow the exploits of these. One of them is a young priest who's in a town, and he just finds himself in the middle of all these mysteries in the middle 50s, late 50s, post-war, before the pop movement, though, solving crimes and whatnot. You have to love that. It's a really sort of thoughtful look at that stuff. Same thing with Sean Evans as Endeavour. He's just a good cop working in the 60s as a young constable, a young DI, unraveling these crimes. I love the fact that both of these shows eschew all of the sort of modern day technology, and they both depend on the sort of flatfoot detective work of characters from
gumshoeing it up.
So whether it's the actual cop or whether it's the priest pretending to be a cop, they go around and they find evidence, and people say things. Nobody makes a cell phone call. Nobody looks anything up on Google, and they have to figure out who did it. Anyway, both fantastic shows from Masterpiece Theater. 6 complete season of Endeavour, 4th of Grantchester. Then we move all the cop drama to the United States of America, and we get ourselves the 9th season of Blue Bloods. Tom Selleck. Look, I still live with him as Magnum. But it's a nutty thing that he's been on this show for longer than Magnum's run. Yeah. Although Magnum is back again in another good figure, but I don't know. Whatever. When an actor plugs himself as a particular character in my mind, they're going to be that character for henceforth and forever.
And unless you're William Shatner and you're able to turn the corner and make Captain Kirk a shadow of T.J. Hooker.
Of T.J. Hooker, yeah, we wish.
Which happened for me for a moment.
Yeah, T.J. Hooker was the thing, and I still will think of him and think of T.J. Hooker. Yeah. Now, when I think of him, I just think of him
or Denny Crane.
Or Denny Crane, yeah. I think of him as selling CPAP machines, whatever the hell he's doing. Anyway, nearly an hour's worth of special features on this 9th season of Blue Bloods. This picks up after a couple of the characters have gotten married. They're both partners, and Tom is trying to figure out whether or not that's a good idea. I rather enjoy Blue Bloods. I don't watch all the Chicago shows. These are all part of the whole Chicago show family, but Blue Bloods sticks in there for me. Same thing happened here. NCIS New Orleans. We are into the 5th season of this show.
It's crazy, right?
Scott Bakula, again, more seasons of this show than he had on Star Trek Enterprise and that he had on Quantum Leap, which is almost 30 years ago now. So these are guys who have held down 3 or 4, relatively speaking, long-run series over the course of, 30 years or give or take. I mean, in the case of Tom Selleck, even longer. That's a hell of an achievement. And if you want to look at the guys who are or ladies, but mostly guys who are the players in terms of having power and making money in Hollywood, look at folks who've had several long-running series on television. You'll find that they're always executive producers on these shows, and you'll find that they get to direct and do all kinds of things. Anyway, this is a 6-disc collection with 24 episodes, all kinds of new stuff on it. This was a good show that I rather enjoyed. NCIS, I rather enjoy this more than I do some of the other NCISs, and certainly the one set in L.A., which I never cared with LL Cool J, and I never cared for that.
Got a few more foreign here. Babylon is a movie you've probably never heard of. This has never been released on video in the U.S. It was released briefly theatrically. I'm kind of amazed. Kino went and really found quite a gem here. This is really one of the more interesting British kind of gritty indies from right around the late 70s, early 80s, the Thatcher period that gave us Stephen Frears and Mike Leigh and Ken Loach and all these guys who came of age at that time, and Sammy and Rosie Got Laid and My Beautiful Laundrette, and a lot of movies came out of that were dealing with a lot of working class issues and various different perspectives, all of them from filmmakers that had worked in British television. So this is from that milieu, but it's also very different, and it kind of precedes them in many respects too. Babylon is the story of a reggae DJ, young reggae DJ, Jamaican guy in Thatcher era England, who's just dealing with all of the absolutely horrendous sociological stuff that's going on at the time. And this was actually originally premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 1980, directed by Franco Rosso. And never really made it here until years and years later, I think. And it got a very, very thin release. But here's also what makes it really, really worth checking out. This was shot by Chris Menges. before The Killing Fields, before he became a director and did, World Apart, all those things. And it's really tremendously well done, especially for a low budget film. You just see the genius of Chris Menges and how it's shot. Written by Martin Stellman, who wrote Quadrophenia, who already, he knows that scene, that gritty blue collar scene very, very well. And there are tons of extras on here as well. They interview Franco Rosso, they interview Stellman. Brinsley Ford, who stars in it, they talk to him as well, the producer. And there's really also a cool short documentary on here on Linton Kwesi, who is whose writings basically inspire this. It's a pretty terrific show, and there's also a Q&A with the cast and crew, which was recorded at the BFI South Bank just about 10 years ago. Also have the new Blu-ray of Last Year at Marienbad from Alain Resnais. This is from a 4K restoration. This is one of the legendary films of the French New Wave. Here's the thing, and this won the Venice Film Festival in 1961. It's a great film, but it also makes no sense whatsoever.
No.
It's a dream.
Oh, yeah. A bunch
It's
of
just a
people
total
standing
dream.
around asking sort of existential questions. And sometimes not even asking them, just thinking them.
Yeah, thinking. Yeah, and you're never quite sure where you are in the chronology, or where you are in reality.
Oh, people float out of that film and never come back.
Yeah, they just kind of. Is it in the past? Is it in someone's imagination? Is this period? Are they wearing period clothes in the present day? Are they wearing present day clothes in a period? Where are we?
Yeah.
Have they met yet? Now, is this after they met? Is this before they met? Is this a flashback? Is it a flash forward? Does it matter?
Yeah. Yet somehow all hauntingly beautiful.
And it all kind of hangs together, and you're always interested.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really go anywhere in particular, and yet it goes to a very interesting place.
Yeah.
It's there's no way to describe it. It's just very Resnais. It's very Alain Resnais. But the 4K restoration is beautiful. The audio commentary by Tim Lucas does its level best to try to guide you through this and make sense of it. So give that man an Oscar just for the effort. It's a good commentary. There's an interview with Volker Schlondorf, who is kind of the he worked with all these guys originally.
Yeah.
So he
did
knew
a
them.
version of Handmaid's Tale, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did the original film.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Robert Duvall and
Yeah. And as well as the Oscar-winning The Tin Drum and a lot of other things. But and then there's a really interesting visual essay by James Quant, who is of course the main programmer at the Toronto Film Festival and Toronto Film Cinematheque. And then there's a making of doc here called Memories of Last Year at Marienbad that was shot with Super 8 footage on the set. Man, is that weird.
Yeah.
It's really kind of disturbing. It demystifies it in a really mysterious way, if that makes sense. And then they even throw a 1956 short film by Alain Resnais on here called Toute la mémoire du monde, which sort of is, in many respects, sort of the inspiration. It's where he was trying things out. Now, here, I'm going to tell you something. Lucio Fulci is out of his mind. Lucio Fulci... Look, there's Giallo. I don't like Giallo, but you can. It's gory and this and that and the other thing. And okay, you're pushing the envelope. I get it. No, I'm sorry. I was not familiar with Touch of Death until this thing arrived from the Raro video line. This is insane. This is completely bonkers. Okay. And there's a special feature on here called When Lucio Fulci Broke the Mirror. No, he broke my brain with this. This is about a gambler, a hopeless, chronic gambler, habitual gambler who's always broke. And here's how you get this. You're going to love this. This is how he resolves his money problems whenever he's broke. Finds a rich lady, puts some moves on her, kills him, eats him. Oh, we're not done.
How does that put money in your pocket?
I don't know. They're rich ladies. He's got, hey, I got money. Now I've killed you. I've inherited the money. I'm kind of hungry, so I got the munchies. I'm going to eat your face. And then, best of all, then somebody starts imitating him. What? Are you kidding me? Come on, man. This is just weird. No, Fulci is basically doing nothing here other than to try to shock you. The story does not hang together, but it doesn't need to. It knows its audience. Crazy, mad lunacy in this insane movie. So there it is. It's Lucio Fulci doing his just weirdest of all time. Lester Parson is the name of the character. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
Lucio Fulci, Touch of Death from Raro Video on Blu-ray.
I got a couple of features I'll knock off before we jump back into the television, including the collector's edition of the 1982 film Vice Squad.
Yeah,
which stars Season Hubley, who I must have had a crush on for a decade between about 1969, about the time of this film. Yes, Season Hubley was she was like Michelle Pfeiffer before Michelle Pfeiffer.
That's right.
That's who
That's
she
a
was.
good way of putting it.
Directed by Gary Sharman with Wings Hauser. I remember this being this very intense film about this young woman who, was a sort of something by day and prostitute by night. One of her friends is killed. There's this pimp played by Wings Hauser named Ramrod. And a really excellent, good name for a pimp indeed, and a really excellent performance. Wings had been on a daytime soap opera for some time, and this cop who's trying to bring him in, and the cop is one of these things where these two men, the pimp on one side and the kind of volatile cop on the other side, are forcing this young woman, this young prostitute, to do all kinds of things, and so she's caught in between, and it's about what she decides to do about both the pimp and the cop. And I remember loving that the most about this, classically sort of B exploitation film. This is a straight-up B exploitation film set on the streets of Hollywood. A great thing about watching this film, you watch this film 1982, and then you watch something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And you get to see that vision that Quentin had of Hollywood, in his case, the late 60s, but nevertheless, it sort of stayed the same there for quite a while. That Hollywood is still in this movie. The 1969 Hollywood of Quentin is still in this 1982 movie, just sort of doing what it's doing. This is a 4K scan of the original elements with a really neat audio commentary by director Gary Sherman and some interviews with some of the other actors on the show, including Beverly Todd, who went on to be in some Quentin Tarantino films, including Jackie Brown. So I'll knock off that one there. A lot of fun there. And then this one, The Harder They Come, starring Jimmy Cliff. Again, a really fantastic film, it's sort of a crime.
And this has been on Criterion before. This comes out every so often, but this is a really nice set.
This looks good for sure. For one thing, it's a 3-disc set.
Yeah,
all kinds of special features here. It's featuring Jimmy Cliff, all sorts of other short films and whatnot in the movie. And this was a groundbreaking film.
It was hugely groundbreaking.
Yeah,
it really was, because it came out. It was sort of in the blaxploitation moment, but that's not what it is.
That's not what it is at all. Yeah.
It's American independent. It's a little bit of the Jamaican. There's a moment where there's a Jamaican new wave. It's uncategorizable. It really is. It's just its own unique, precious moment in time.
And it's eternally hip and happening too.
It is,
movie. And the music never goes out of style. This is the collector's edition, The Harder They Fall, from 1972, from Shout Select.
Got some interesting other classics here, or library titles. From, as long as we're on the classics line, Film Movement Classics has just released on Blu-ray The Reflecting Skin by Philip Ridley, which was a 1990 movie with a very young Viggo Mortensen in it, and Lindsay Duncan, who just is always magnificent. I just adore Lindsay Duncan. But this is a film that had completely fallen off my radar. I don't know that I even saw it when it came out originally. I think I may have seen it on VHS at some point.
I know I did not.
But this is a kind of a mystery thriller set in Idaho of the 1950s, centering around an English woman who is a widow, and let's just say that people start to suspect something about her that is rather outrageous, and this leads to a romance with Viggo Mortensen that is fairly dangerous, and it's I guess the best way to say this is this is kind of rural Gothic noir. It's like modern rural Gothic noir.
Yeah.
That's sort of the thing that happened in the last few decades, is that noir moved out of the urban environments, out of the cities, and went into the countryside and the mountains.
Yeah,
and small
even
towns.
Southern Gothic lives in the zone. But
Even
rural Gothic, Southern Gothic, yeah.
So this is, and it's an interesting film. Philip Ridley hasn't really gone on to do much since then, really, as a filmmaker. But what a really interesting thing. There's a commentary by Ridley, and an essay and a featurette. And then also, here's another weird blast of a movie that I'd forgotten about. Shortcut to Happiness. If I went to you and I said there's this movie that has Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin and Dan Aykroyd and Jennifer Love Hewitt and Kim Cattrall, and it's called Shortcut to Happiness, you would say I would remember those people all being in a movie, and I don't remember that movie.
No, I don't.
I don't remember. I vaguely remember this. Anyway, this is from like maybe a decade ago or so, 2007, 2008, and this just went nowhere, and probably for good reason. It's effectively an attempt to update Devil and Daniel Webster in a really not very successful way. It tries to sort of lose its classic bearings, make it a little more funny than it should be, a little more romantic than it probably should be. Alec Baldwin plays the guy who's supposed to sell his soul, and Jennifer Love Hewitt plays the devil. There's a twist, and Anthony Hopkins just kind of walks through this thing. It's really a very peculiar movie. It just doesn't all kind of hang together, but it is a historical oddity. And then Mothra is out in a steel case from Mill Creek. Mothra is a ridiculous monster. Of all of the kaiju from the world of Godzilla, it's just absolutely absurd. It's a giant moth, for crying out loud. Just get big giant bug spray and take that thing out. That's all you need. Just need bug spray, for crying out loud. Stupid thing.
Yeah, it's not
but
Godzilla.
It has a following. It has a following. Atomic bomb created a big giant moth, and now it's a monster. Whatever. So it's out there. It has Japanese and U.S. versions on it. The latter of which has an extra, or the former of which, the Japanese version, has an extra 11 minutes, and then there's an audio commentary with some Japanese film historians by the name of Steve Reifel and Ed Godziszewski, something like that. And there it is. It's Mothra in a friggin' steel case, collectible case. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Dip back over to a little TV.
Yeah.
American Gods, Season 2. Got into Season 1 of this. Interesting sort of premise there. This guy gets out of a prison. He meets his name's Shadow. He meets this guy named Wednesday. And the next thing you know, we're in this television series that involves, the actual gods of lore. Mankind and the battle that they are engaged in for supremacy over blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. It looks not as uninteresting as I'm making it sound. It's actually kind of fun. The visuals are really what makes this show, though. It's a gorgeously shot show. I'll give it that. Special features include all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff, including this is all out of the Neil Gaiman universe, by the way.
Sure.
Lucifer and all those other things. If particularly for fans of Gaiman and the little universes that he creates, American Gods is an interesting sort of undertaking. Did not deal with the second season, but I'll assume it picks up fairly well where the first season left off and goes where it goes. Blu-ray and digital there. The Walking Dead, the complete 9th season. What can you say? The dead continue to walk, and apparently they will be for a while.
Yeah.
Hey, some of the sequels have not done as well as this original series. This is, of course, the original series. But fans of the show are fans of the show, and I suppose they'll go on for a bit. I don't really remember what happens in the 9th season of the complete season of The Walking Dead because I tapped out after season 4.
Yeah.
Enough zombies for me after season 4. Sorry. That's the way that goes. Special features include deleted scenes, a memorandum, whispers behind the mask, all kinds of neat sort of bonus material, including some extra scene stuff from episode 908. Arrow, the complete 7th season. If I'm not mistaken, I think Arrow is tapping out after this season. This current season that we're in right now, I think will be their last. I stuck around with Arrow for about 4 seasons before I had to go and file my nails or do whatever the hell else I was doing that was more interesting than Arrow. Arrow was not one of the series, one of the DC series that captured me in the way that Flash or Supergirl.
But it started it. It
started it all.
Thing,
which is an interesting thing, and it hung in there. Again, this is the 11th season, and frankly, it's better DC than any DC that has been made into mainstream cinema. That's for daggum sure.
Yeah,
better DC than any of that. Anyway, Oliver Queen as the Arrow, roaming around with that bow and arrow doing stuff. How is he in Hawkeye? How are he and Hawkeye any different in what
The difference being, I guess, because there are these facsimiles between DC and Warner.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's Flash, and then there's Quicksilver, and on and on. You can find the facsimiles. So between the two Archers, I think Green Arrow was always the cooler one because he did things with the arrows. Like Hawkeye was just
a good shot,
a really good shot. But Green Arrow would be like, whatever Green Lantern could come up with the ring. Green Arrow would be like, I got an arrow just like that. That quiver had 500 different kinds of weird arrows that all did stuff that Batman couldn't.
And they never seem to run out. Either one of these guys. That was always kind of interesting.
Yeah,
there for sure. From 1954, the series Public Defender, which is a series that not a whole lot of folks remember. This is from the Silver series. This is a series that not a whole lot of folks remember that I rather enjoyed because it was probably the first series about the public defender at the time that a thing called a public defender first came into being. We think that there's always been a thing called a public defender throughout history that you had a right to it, but no, the Miranda right and the right to a public defender are relatively recent things across the course of history of things. And this show could see that was a new thing that came into the public sphere and spoke to it, and I rather liked it quite a lot. Anyway, ran from 1954 to 1955. Black and white, well done, like the stories, interesting crime drama, sort of set from the point of view of the guy trying to make sure that the innocent do not go to prison for things they did not do. By the time you get to Law and Order, it all changes, and the shows start to point themselves at the prosecutors, and we're looking at everything from the prosecutor's point of view. It basically was Perry Mason and this guy who were working, from the other side of the thing. I love the Murdoch Mysteries. This is the Murdoch Mysteries collection, season 9 and 12. I just love the Murdoch Mysteries.
Yeah.
Canadian series, set at the turn of, I guess, the last century, more or less. Right, the turn of the last century. And it's just it's Sherlock Holmesy, but not really. It's not Sherlock Holmes, and they're engaging and using a whole lot of the scientific innovations that came up at the turn of the last century, which Murdoch engages in order to solve crimes. I love the fact that the coroner in this show is a woman. Look, it's not Bones or anything like that, but it is smart. The mysteries are really, really good, and I love the way they use the science. They lean into the science doing this Edwardian period in Toronto. I also love the fact that it's actually not just shot in Canada, it's set in Canada. It's set in Toronto.
So we're going to talk about some Arrow and some Criterion stuff now. Some really great releases. Arrow just keeps killing it after being such a cool brand overseas. They are really starting to compete very heavily with the special editions that Criterion releases. They have now released Akio Jissoji's The Buddhist Trilogy. Now, Jissoji is a really, really interesting director. Jissoji worked on everything from Ultraman to all kinds of really fringy stuff that was on Japanese television, Japanese theaters. The guy just always worked. And but he also made a really interesting trilogy known as the Buddhist Trilogy, which is very poetic and artful and not very typical of what his other work was necessarily, what his other work consisted of. The three films are This Transient Life, Mandala, and Poem. And they're gritty. Don't get me wrong. They're not just sort of languid. He's not Ozu. But what he really is pushing the envelope on what is and is not what are and are not the normal tools of filmmaking for Japanese cinema at the time. And these are all really, really interesting films. Poem, which is black and white and just beautiful as can be, is basically the story of that's, I would say, probably the best of the three films. But it's the story of a young servant boy and who is kind of trapped in a battle of wits between his brothers, and it says a lot about disenfranchised youth and broken families at that particular point in time in Japanese society. It's really, really quite powerful. Mandala is the only color film of these, and it is very, very difficult to watch sexually. It's deals with violence and some things that are very, very tough to watch. But in the overall breadth of the trilogy, it's really, really worth checking out. The one that is most famous, of course, is This Transient Life, which won an award at the 1970 Locarno Film Festival, and which is about a very, very wealthy brother and sister combo, and trying to sort of find their way in the world despite super traditional parents. It's and it goes in a place that you might expect for a Japanese movie, but not want. If I say to you it's a story of a brother and a sister, I'll let you do the math on the rest of it. Also from Arrow is the very famous Alice, Sweet Alice by Alfred Soule. This is kind of a legendary cult film. It's been out a number of times on Blu-ray and DVD. It has basically Brooke Shields gets murdered by a crazy lunatic, and her parents then have to begin to face the possibility that maybe it's her sister that's killed her and is killing other people. And it's a 1960s slasher film that has kind of been elevated to art film status, and not entirely undeservedly. The audio commentary by Richard Harlan Smith makes that case. There's also an archival commentary with Alfred Soule and his editor, and tons of other extras on here that argue for why this should be elevated beyond just being a 1970s slasher film. Al Pacino in Cruising, William Friedkin's very controversial movie that was considered inflammatory at the time because of the way that it depicted the Castro district in San Francisco, the way that it depicted gay culture at that point in time, considered a film that was bigoted in its stereotypes. I think it's a mistake to do that. In hindsight, it really is very faithful to the novel written by Gerald Walker, and I think you could argue that Friedkin's films are all pretty much the same attitude toward the world. They're all cynical. This is not different in tone from
Everybody Everywhere is Evil and trying to,
That's it. Yeah. To Live and Die in L.A., The French Connection, The Exorcist, they're all part and parcel of the same.
There are no good guys in Friedkin.
But I'll tell you, it's one of Al Pacino's best performances. It really is very disturbing. Paul Sorvino gives a great performance in here as well. And look, it's like, Pacino sort of in Serpico mode here, and that's what he was doing at the time. And, we're moving from the 70s into the 80s, and it is still a legendary film.
Yeah.
Let me knock out the two criterions here real quickly. The first, there's one that's very well known, a Douglas Sirk film, and the other one by Lucille Cara, which is almost unheard of but worth mentioning. The Inland Sea is the less known film by Lucille Cara. And it is this is in both English and in Japanese. It's only an hour long, probably not even quite. Made in 1991, and it's sort of a fascinating movie, roughly inspired by a travelogue from 1971 when film scholar Donald Ritchie elaborated on his experiences with Japan's Inland Sea. And in 1991, Lucille Cara decided to parallel that trip and go back to the same places and shoot the Inland Sea and sort of give it the poetic treatment that it deserved. And it's fascinating where this goes. There are all kinds of, ins and outs, places that you didn't realize had anything to do with Japan, and there are people who show up in here, notably a very famous American singer that you would never expect to, and really, it's quite amazing. It's a beautiful movie about a little known area that is just one of Japan's great treasures. The 1954 film Magnificent Obsession is one of Douglas Sirk's most famous films, deservedly so. Beautifully shot in color. In 1954, you were getting really, really rich color, and it's the movie that made Brock Hudson a star. It really is. He plays a playboy who has an accident and then has to go into surgery, and that is your instigating moment that takes you into all kinds of just beautifully elaborate melodramatic twists and turns, and the color just blooms. And the original Mrs. Ronald Reagan, Jane Wyman, also stars in this, and it is this is melodrama with a capital M. It really, really just goes to the ends of the earth, and yet it makes some very subtle observations about human nature, as was the practice of Douglas Sirk at the time. It is really one of his very, very best, and a lot of extras on here, as you would expect from a Criterion. Audio commentary with film scholar Thomas Doherty, and the 1935 adaptation of the same novel, Magnificent Obsession, which is restored on here for a perfect double feature of both versions. So it's really great. Also an Eckert Schmidt documentary from Ufa to Hollywood, Douglas Sirk Remembers, which was also made in 1991, the same year as the Inland Sea.
Oh, interesting stuff. I love it. Let's see. From 1998, From the Earth to the Moon. So in 1995, Tom Hanks, Ron Howard, Apollo 13.
Yep.
Interesting that this comes up at this moment at the 50th anniversary of all of that. And then, so a couple of years later, 1998, Ron Howard with Imagine Entertainment, or Tom Hanks with Imagine Entertainment, puts together this sort of amalgamation of From the Earth to the Moon, which tells the story of the putting together of the Apollo space program, with the combination of Tom Hanks hosting. You hear him in voiceover occasionally, and then the rest of a pretty interesting cast of actors playing all of the critical figures: Nick Searcy as Deke Slayton, and so on. Stephen Root as Chris Kraft, and they sort of tell that story not in a format that's worthy of HBO rather than a theatrical format, and builds you back into the sort of Apollo 13. This is digitally remastered in HD, and it's just gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful stuff. But I'm glad it was shot on film in 1998. I sure am. The Good Place, the complete third season. Ted Danson, Christian Bale in this fairly odd and quirky comedy that, to be honest with you, I only got into in the last season or so, after a sort of twist. I'm not going to ruin anything for anybody, which sort of reset the dynamic of the series and made it more interesting to me. It was always funny, but after that twist, it became a more interesting series too, in the way we look at the nature of people and who they are and what they are and how they behave. This is a lot of fun. From the creators of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Parks and Recreation, sees the complete third season of The Good Place. Colorized. I Love Lucy. The Colorized collection, 16 classic episodes that were all in black and white, that are all now in stunning, stunning color. I was going to say Technicolor, but I actually don't think it's Technicolor. These are beautifully done. I'm not sure how I feel about the colorizing of them all, but the colorization has been a thing that's been around with us now since the middle 80s. I think Ted Turner figured out how to do that, or his scientists did anyway. Look, Lucy with that stunning red hair, it's great. These conclude all those sort of fascinating episodes that you love, with the big piece of bread coming out of the oven and all that kind of stuff. If you want to see Lucy as an actual redhead, go ahead and check it out. Special features include an explanation of the colorizing and how they do it of Lucy. Okay, that's fine with me. I guess I'll be okay with that.
Let's see. I'm gonna do. Let's see what we're gonna get into here. I'll do some Kinos. Okay. We got 4 really cool old Kinos here. I wanted to save one of them for the end, but I'll go with it first. Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail. These are all on Blu-ray, all from the Kino Studio Classics collection. From 1929, very early Hitchcock, really kind of getting his thriller on in Blackmail. This is rudimentary Hitchcock, but you see all of the tropes, all of the obsessions and the themes, and the cameo and everything. I mean, he's really he's putting it together very, very early, even before he starts to make all of his British films. Well before he comes to the United States, more than a decade before he made Rebecca and Notorious and all of those really cool films with David O. Selznick. Effectively, this is just about a woman who's trying to get out from under the thumb of a blackmailer, but it's just, you can tell that Hitchcock has a command of what's going on that other filmmakers do not. This was his first sound film, and he uses it incredibly well. You can, even though it's based on a play, he takes it out of the realm of the theater, and he he makes it cinematic. He's doing things with sound that other filmmakers were not doing. He sees the potential of the sound medium in ways that are remarkable for the time. And this also includes, believe it or not, a 76-minute silent version, because at the time you couldn't have a sound film everywhere. So they had to make the film viable for as many theaters as possible. So even though it was a sound film, got to make a silent version because most theaters are still silent in 1929. Fascinating. And that has a really great score on it by the Mont Alto Motion Picture Orchestra. And this is film history. It's beautiful. It's absolutely essential. And the audio commentary by Tim Lucas is absolutely just perfect. Really, really perfect. Also from Kino is Alfred Hitchcock's Murder, which was made the following year and shows even more evolution in his style. And Nick Pinkerton does this audio commentary. There's also the 1931 German version of the same story, which Hitchcock apparently also directed, and I didn't know that. It's called Mary. I had absolutely no clue that even it was a thing. So you learn something every day. I even took a Hitchcock class in college, so that was news to me. But this is his third sound film. And it is, again, I think Blackmail is probably a better movie, but it's, this still shows the evolution of the style, and it's all about, an actress who's convicted of murder, and there's somebody who was on the jury of her trial who thinks that she's innocent, and now, he decides to revisit the case and absolve her of her conviction. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting film. Then we have, on a lighter note, Sweet Charity with the ageless Shirley Maclaine, who is still with us, thank goodness. She is just absolutely wonderful, from 1969, when Shirley Maclaine could dance up a storm.
Oh, yeah.
And Sweet Charity is just, look, it's Bob Fosse and Shirley Maclaine doing Federico Fellini. Do I got to tell you anything else?
Yeah.
It's just, Bob Fosse said, why don't I take Knights of Cabiria, make it an American musical, have people do my Fosse dance, and I'll let Shirley be in the middle of it.
Jazz hands.
And, Sammy Davis Jr. and this movie, and Stubby Kaye and Ricardo Montalban, and this thing is just Chita Rivera. It's just, this is one of the all-time fun movies. It really is. It's just super, super fun. Music by Cy Coleman, the legendary Hollywood great. And this is, I think, of all the Bob Fosse dance movies, probably far and away my favorite. This also includes the 145-minute version, newly restored in 4K, but transferred here to Blu-ray, and featurettes on the film, and Edith Head's costumes, and a Kat Ellinger commentary. Come on, get it. It's Sweet freaking Charity.
I have to filter all of my thoughts about Bob Fosse and his work now through the prism of
Fosse
Verdon, and how much of that was about Gwen Verdon.
Yes. Very much.
Yeah, so
better believe it.
Big fan of Bob Fosse, but now I realize I'm a bigger fan of Gwen Verdon.
Uh-huh. And my last Kino here, before I turn it back over to Tim, is Lost Highway. And boy, am I fond of this. One of my favorite David Lynch films.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun when that movie was out.
1997, edited and produced by Mary Sweeney, who was wonderful enough to hire my wife to work for them at the time, and produced by Deepak Nair, for whom my wife also worked for many subsequent years, casted by Joanna Ray, who we also know very well. I feel like this is family. I know everybody involved in this film. And I was there for every day of this thing, hearing every day about Post and what's going on. And Robert Loggia is crazy in this movie. And Robert Blake shaved his eyebrows. And,
Richard Pryor's last screen appearance.
He was so frail at the time.
Yeah.
Look, this is a body-switching movie that makes no sense.
No.
And it doesn't need to. It's just crazy.
Classic Lynch, though.
It's classic Lynch.
Way,
It's totally surreal. It's psychologically insane. I think it's better than Mulholland Drive. Patricia Arquette, Balthazar Getty, Bill Pullman. It is an absolutely fantastic movie. And here's the clincher. This actually kind of inspired Michael Haneke's Cachet, which LAFCA awarded for Best Foreign Language Film to some years later. Michael Haneke in Cachet is riffing on this, not just the weird gimmick of getting a videotape of somebody who has, recorded you, but there are character names and there are all kinds of interesting things. Our colleague Andy Klein,
yes.
really, Andy goes to town when he
yeah.
senses a movie conspiracy, and he's like, "Oh, there's a puzzle going on," and he goes nuts on Lynch films.
Yeah.
And then Caché just lit a whole different fuse. There's lineage, there's sinew that connects Lost Highway to Michael Haneke's Caché. Get them both, watch them both. It'll blow your mind.
Oh man, fantastic! A couple of TVs.
Yeah.
Season 1 of New Amsterdam, a series that I did not watch.
Yeah.
Starring a guy named Ryan Eggle, who's on a series called Blacklist, which I also did not watch. Nevertheless, I could see that this is one of those doctor drama series. I got to tell you, the reason why I didn't watch this is because I'm burned on doctor drama series. Great, 15 years of Grey's Anatomy.
I hear you.
And I go back to Medical Center with Chad Everett.
Right.
And all. So it's not like I'm a guy that taps out easy on these things. I was a St. Elsewhere man. And it seems to me that ER, right through ER, all of it. It seems to me that these contemporary series are all amalgamations of some of those earlier series that gave us, Denzel Washington came out of St. Elsewhere and all that kind of stuff. They all seem saying this is about a crusading young doctor in some urban hospital who doesn't like the way things are done, so he's going to shake things up. The tagline, break the rules, heal the system. And I don't know. I can't. There's another one on about the Good Doctor, about the doctor who has Down syndrome or something. I don't know what he has, but he has something. He's ADD, and I'm like, enough with the doctors. Yep. and break it because none of it actually plays out in the real world. Nevertheless, I understand that folks who like this actually like it quite a lot. Bonus features include some deleted scenes. The Spanish princess, which is an interesting period. And in any case, during the Tudor period, as we watch Catherine Aragon, who was Spanish, and she's trying to negotiate this British hierarchy.
Yep.
As these families did that thing that they do where they swapped princesses and married them off and all this kind of, mostly to try to create situations that would stave off war. Which is why the English royal family has a whole bunch of Germans.
That's right.
When you look at the site, it's because they married. They had to do that, man.
And let me tell you, that saved my family's life.
Yeah.
I've never shared this on this show before, but my mother was a World War II refugee. My mother was born in Prussia and Pomeranian, and they fled the collapse of the Eastern Front. And my grandfather, who lost everything, lost his farm and the whole thing. He said, as they're going on the back roads with these columns of refugees, he said, the only way we're going to escape the Russians, our only safe haven, will be to go to Hanover, the city of Hanover. He said, because that is where the British royal family traces their roots.
Yeah.
The British will never let the Russians take Hanover.
Yeah.
And he was right. They went to Hanover, and it wound up in the British zone.
Yeah, man. That's just fascinating, these histories. The things that we think we know about the lineages of humans, get that DNA test and blow your mind. Jamestown, from the makers of Downton Abbey. This is the third complete season.
It's getting thin.
It's becoming a soap opera.
Yeah.
It's all about people
the
cheating
women.
on other people.
It's all about the women.
And I'm like, that's unfortunate that didn't hold on to that sort of Downton Abbey sort of strain there, whatever. Anyway, Tom Cullen and Mark Hamill, and I love watching Mark. It's funny that the last 20 years of Mark Hamill's career, to me, are infinitely more interesting than that first 20 that began with Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
The characters and all the stuff, right? Even through playing that character again in his last movie or two.
Yeah,
he's just his voice work, all that kind of stuff, far and away more interesting than watching him running around that original Star Trek movie in which he cannot act at all.
I will not say anything mean about Mark Hamill because he's a neighbor, and I run right up and through the driveway every time I go on a jog. And his wife is lovely, and they are fantastic people.
But season 2 of this is very good. Knightfall, and like I said, last 20 years been killing it. Mark Hamill been killing it. Do you know this film, Vidego Palace?
Yeah.
Series, I should say.
Yes. Vidego Palace, from Acorn TV. It takes place in Portugal. It's a British production, but it takes place in 1936 Portugal, and it's sort of like a Portuguese version of the. I don't want the hotel, the Indian hotel.
The first Marigold
Hotel.
Yeah.
So there's a palace in Portugal where everybody kind of goes to vacation, and then you intersect that with the Spanish Civil War in 1936, and throw in a really soapy relationship, and There it is. You know what? It's I mean, it's period. It's beautifully done. It's very, very soapy. It's very much a melodramatic romance, but you know, it has a nice sheen to it. It's like, I don't know, Jewel in the Crown set in Portugal is a way of doing it. Anyway, yeah, Video Palace on Acorn TV. I want to take us out with
just real super duper quickly.
Do
50th anniversary edition, the best of the Carol Burnett show. 50th big giant box, sort of golden box with this red thing. This is how cocky the folks are who are putting this out. There is no mention whatsoever of a single episode that's inside this box, because they know that they can put almost any episode inside this box, and it will be one
That's right.
of the best of the Carol Burnett show, because they're all freaking fantastic. So they don't have to put on, episode this and episode that. Doesn't make any difference what episode it is. It's one of the best.
Brilliant.
And it's fantastic. 50th anniversary edition, the best of the Carol Burnett show. A remastered. It looks fantastic. Good stuff.
We're gonna cover that again, by the way, on the gift guide later on this year when we put all of our big box sets together. So I'm gonna take us out with 4 Blu-rays from the Warner Archive collection, and then 2 from Flicker Alley. I'm gonna take you right into some beautiful film history here. First off, from the Warner Archive collection on Blu-ray is Footlight Parade. Which is most famous for featuring some of Busby Berkeley's most amazing numbers. Tim knows that I've got a whole thing going with Busby Berkeley for another show, but the Footlight Parade was the follow-up to 42nd Street, which really, really kind of, in many respects, saved the Warner Brothers musical department. 42nd Street got nominated for Best Picture, and next thing you know, all the same people show up on Footlight Parade, along with James Cagney.
Yeah.
And James Cagney was a gangster guy before that, and Warner Brothers finally acceded to his wishes to show that he could dance.
Because he started his entire career in vaudeville dancing.
That's it.
You know,
he's a musical guy.
Nigga.
So he lost the gun, and here he plays an impresario who movies are changing.
Yeah.
Sound is coming in, and you can't have these
This
live.
is 1933 or so.
33. You can't have these live dance numbers anymore in front of your silent films. You got to have talkies. And he decides, you know what? The prologue, I'm going to start shooting film prologues. I'm going to do big musical numbers, and you'll just attach those to the head of your movies, and there it is. And that's an excuse. Lloyd Bacon, the director, he leaves, and Busby Berkeley comes in and does these elaborate numbers, and 2 of them are absolutely fantastic. Now, Shanghai Lils, which is the one that ends it, is politically very incorrect. There's a lot of Asian stereotyping in it. But it's 1933.
Yeah, but it's a beautifully choreographed number, executed number.
Cagney is amazing. Yeah. He's amazing in it. By a mountain stream is incredible. Has all the underwater sequences that sort of foreshadow what Berkeley would do later on in the 50s. Really, just a fantastic film. And the Blu-ray is pristine and to die for, because you can actually see on Dick Powell's collar, you can see a fly in a couple of scenes. I was sitting there right in front of the TV on the 4K. And I'm like, there's a fly on his shoulder, and now it's on his ear, and I'm watching the fly. I'm not even paying attention to Dick Powell anymore. It's hysterical.
Dick Powell, Joan Blondell, Ruben Keeler. The cast is ridiculous.
It's great, and these were all stock players for Warner Brothers at the time. We also have, speaking of stock players, the immortal William Powell and Myrna Loy in none other than The Thin Man. Yes. I want him to put the rest of the Thin Man movies out. Do it as a box set, darn it all. But nonetheless, W.S. Van Dyke just directs the daylights out of these 2. The dialogue goes a mile a minute. There has never been a team that compared to these 2 in terms of spitting out dialogue. Nick and Nora Charles doing their detective thing with dialogue that is just to die for. You cannot believe how good it is. It's magical.
Yeah.
It's just a magical pairing. Myrna Loy and William Powell just killing it. And then we've also got Merrill's Marauders, which is remarkably a true story. This is a movie that's kind of disappeared a tiny bit from film history, perhaps because it was the same year as Lawrence of Arabia and a lot of other amazing movies. 1962, a Samuel Fuller movie that's all about the jungle warfare in Burma. And specifically a very, very famous unit that was known as Merrill's Marauders, which is the 5307th composite unit. But it's a great Samuel Fuller movie. If you've seen Bridge on the River Kwai, which David Lean did in the late 50s and 57, it has a bit of that feel, but it's a Samuel Fuller film, and it's an awful lot of fun. And it's beautifully shot and has some really, really great performances in it, including Andrew Dugan and Claude Akins.
Yeah.
Good old Claude Akins. And then Clint Eastwood's Bronco Billy.
Oh, wow.
Which I can't believe this is now a classic. But this is out on Blu-ray finally. Should have probably been a special edition at some point. But Clint was dating Sandra Locke at the time, who was also in the film. And this is Clint in kind of his lighter mode, poking fun at himself a little bit and his Western roots. Clint directed it and does a great job. He's funny. His timing is great. Playing kind of a sharpshooter in a Wild West show, he gets to do a lot of things he doesn't do in a lot of other movies.
It was one of the first movies that Clint actually played the piano and sang.
I know.
Paint your wagon.
He's stretching. He's spreading his wings. And then going to take everybody out on a couple of amazing new titles from Flicker Alley, 2 silent classics that you absolutely must not miss. The first, I'm going to go with the more recent one first, from 1929, the last silent film by a very famous Soviet filmmaker, a famous Russian Soviet filmmaker at the time, by the name of Friedrich Ermler. Who doesn't really have a place in the pantheon of Eisenstein and all the rest of it, and Ziga Vertov and a lot of these others. But it's still a really, really interesting film. It's a very, very daring film. It almost feels more like a German film in some respects from the silent era. Has a kind of Weimar vibe to it in many respects. It's about a soldier with amnesia from the Great War, and who's been shell shocked into amnesia. Has a lot to say about war. Has a lot. It's more sort of individualistic than what you would get from somebody like Eisenstein from the same period. It's a really superb film. Also has a couple of musical scores on it, both of them excellent, and a whole bunch of extras, including a commentary track with Russian film historian Peter Bagrov and film restoration guy Robert Byrne, who's got some great things to say too. The real gem here is L'Argent by the director Marcel L'Herbier, L'Herbier. This is adapted from the Émile Zola from 1928, and this was kind of a lost film until they put it back together again in the 1970s and kept on working on it, and finally in the 1990s it got its proper restoration thanks to financing from Lobster Films, and here it is. For decades this thing has never been seen in anything less than kind of a horrendous form, and we get the complete 2.5-hour L'Argent with all of its Zolian. Is that even a word? Emile Zoli?
It is now.
Anyway, it is now. Zolian glory. Really just a superb epic story. It is all, like much of Zola, it's all about it's a 19th century story that tells all about a bank collapse, and it's using that as a story of rich and poor and all the social conditions that plagued France at the time. And as a silent film that overcomes the handicap of not having dialogue, it tells a remarkably epic story with great detail, and it is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful effort. Beautifully restored, and that is L'Argent from 1928 from Flicker Alley, L'Argent, and the equally superb Fragment of an Empire from 1929. All right, with that, we are done this week, and we'll be back next week, hopefully with more great trailers for films from the fall.
Mm-hmm.